welcome back to One Conversation, where one conversation can change a life. My name is JC Macias, and here with me are my two lovely co-hosts, Brianna Vallejo and Lisa Piazza. So, for those who don't know, January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month, and we actually have an amazing, great speaker here today who will be helping us cover today's topic. What is sex trafficking? We would like to provide you with a content warning. Some of the information we will be discussing today may be explicit or triggering. So if you are listening in, make sure you practice some meditation with us towards the end of our episode.
Yeah, so we are really excited to have our guest here in the room with us today. This is going to be a really fantastic episode. We always say when we're doing educational episodes, we want to provide, as much education to the community as we can, right? We want our community members, our fellow neighbors, to be kind of primed with this information. And this topic, sex trafficking, it's so extremely important. It's something that we really need to bring it to light, right? As kind of awful the topic as it may seem, it's so important that we discuss it, that we can recognize it, and kind of learn how to support others, right? Or maybe seek help if that's needed. So we're really excited, as intense as this episode may be getting today. We always, with our guests, we always have fun questions ready, and that's how we're going to start off today. So let me go ahead and introduce. We have Melissa Holland here today. She is the director and founder of Awaken. And of course, she'll explain a little bit about what Awaken does and some of the incredible programs that their agency provides. Before we get serious, Melissa, this is your first time here with us. As much as, we were providing content and education on really intense topics, right? Talking about some really difficult subject matter. Again, we like to have fun. And so we have a few fun questions to start, but this is kind of our every guest question that we ask. And so we're going to start off with our one conversation question. That is, if you could have lunch with anyone throughout time, fictional, non-fictional, past, present, who would it be and why?
I had an answer and then I heard you say fiction or non-fictional, and I think I might have just switched it. I was originally going to have, probably more of even a serious answer than what's necessary. But I think I'm going to go with Sam from Lord of the Rings.
Ooh,
wow, I think,
okay.
I think Sam is underestimated by so many people, and I just absolutely love his character. I think, in particular, anybody doing the work we do should look at the life of Sam and how he supported Frodo in his mission to sort of, accomplish this opportunity to fight his own battles and to, rid the world of evil in this form of the ring. And Sam was just the best champion to see somebody go through their own obstacles and to not get in the way of the person having to go through it. So I actually, once you said that, I was like changing it up. And then I kind of thought, Gandalf, Frodo, no, I'm going with Sam.
I love that was off the cuff for you too, because I'm like, wow, like what an incredible answer. And I love that you circle it all back, right? So like kind of the work that we all do and that representation, right? Of just that constant unbridled support, right?
Yeah.
Love that answer. What a
Always
good
looking
start.
for inspiration. Always looking for inspiration.
And I was not
Love
expecting that. So love it.
No.
Yes.
Wild
I
card
wasn't either, to
answer.
be honest with you, until I heard the non-fiction.
Wild card answer. We love it. We love
Yeah,
it.
it's crazy what our minds will do, what they'll just remind us of.
Yep, one
Next,
word will put a whole different direction, wouldn't it?
exactly. Our next fun question for you: if you have one superpower, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I'm hoping this works too. What I would do is, so teleport is the easy answer for me, but I'm hoping in my teleportation, I can also breathe without breathing, because I'd actually love to teleport to visit other planets and see what's going on out there.
Ooh.
So I don't know if that works or not. Otherwise, I'm going to be stuck to our oxygen breathing planets in my which is great, but especially in the year of travel restrictions, I really want to be able to teleport.
Absolutely.
Especially to space. Yeah, I love, again, that consideration, I think, is just kind of beyond the wild card aspect of these answers. I'm loving every second of this right now.
Yeah.
I love it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Melissa, for giving us those laughs and sharing. God, your answers were amazing. I don't want to be ever put on the spot in regards to my superpower because there's so many, the longest list. So definitely the list is long. So let's go ahead and get started on our next question for you, Melissa. And, we would really like to get to know your agency, Awaken. So can you give us a little overview in regards to what Awaken does?
Yeah, so in short, we offer services and support to women and children that have been involved in the commercial sex trade. We've got housing, a drop-in center, an education center, case management, counseling, tons of groups, tons of fun. Like you guys, I think just the recognition and the priority of fun is very important, especially in the work of trauma and abuse. And so we try to incorporate a lot of that in what we do, physical activities, rock climbing, all kinds of that stuff. But in short, we offer direct services to women and children that have been affected by whether it be sex trafficking or any area of the commercial sex trade. They don't have to identify as a victim of anything to receive services that awaken. They just, under that umbrella, essentially, is really all that is required for any kind of partnership or work with Awaken. And then, we also do prevention work and trainings and awareness. And we have three pillars. It's restoration, so all the direct service provision, prevention, try to work ourselves out of a job. Ultimately, we want to see this thing eradicated completely. And then city transformation. And it's that third pillar that allows us to try to actually change the culture around this entire issue. Those are the things that we sort of can reduce down to.
Yes, thank you so much, Melissa, for everything that you do. We are so grateful to have an organization like yours available. And just for those who are asking, what is sex trafficking, right? Just to let you know, sex trafficking falls under the umbrella of human trafficking. So let's just start off with talking about what human trafficking is. And human trafficking is modern day slavery. So trafficking is the practice of exploiting adults and children for the use as commodities in conditions of sexual and labor servitude. Human trafficking is determined based on action, means, and purpose. And action can include anything from recruitment, harboring, transporting, providing, or obtaining an individual for the purpose of labor or sexual exploitation. And then when we talk about means, it refers to the use of force, fraud, or coercion to establish and maintain control of the victim. And then when we highlight purpose, it really refers to the intent to use and exploit the victim for labor or sex. And so, like I mentioned, sex trafficking falls under that umbrella. Sex trafficking is when a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which a person is performing the act, that is under the age of 18. And, trafficking victims may be minors up to 18 years old or adult 18 years or older. So any child or any minor under the age of 18 engaged in commercial sex acts are victims of sex trafficking. And I just really want to highlight that. So even if there is no evidence of force, fraud, or coercion, minor victims of sex trafficking may be also referred to as C-sex. So that means commercially sexually exploited children. And again, I just want to highlight that there is no such thing as a child prostitute. Minors engaged in commercial sex are victims of sex trafficking and child abuse. And it's really important to, kind of make that effort to minimize their experience and really shift the responsibility, to the child is wrong and just not okay. So with that being said, this is such an important topic, and we are just so thankful that you are here listening in and really just making yourself knowledgeable around human trafficking and sex trafficking.
Yeah, because really, I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions about trafficking. And I know even personally before coming into this field, I did not understand the severity of this issue. I did not understand the prevalence of this issue here in the US, right? A lot of this stuff is kind of either swept under the rug, or maybe we're seeing media representations, or we're hearing news stories about other places in the world, right? And we think that's not happening here. And so, just there's all these kind of external resources giving us a lot of misconceptions about sex trafficking and what it is. And so we would love to hear from you, Melissa. I mean, being so boots on the ground in this field, what are some of the common misconceptions on trafficking that you hear or see often?
Yeah, I appreciate first, Jason, just you talking about the children as well, and just the importance of recognizing um, there's no choice in that for kids. The choice, it just doesn't exist. And I think one of the misconceptions that I've first seen is that choice then suddenly enters in when they turn 18. And so being mindful of, one of the things that I learned, I first started studying this issue around 2009. And one of the first things that I learned that actually compelled me to get more involved was that 80 to 90% of adults in prostitution actually first started out with their abuse and neglect or trafficking as a child. And I've just seen as our society shift the mindset once they turn 18 and they're adults, that magically they're now choosing this. And so I think the consideration of the whole person is really important before we put these labels of what choice is. And I think, for us, one of the things we've seen is if it was choice, it would be very easy. We wouldn't have to exist to the extent that we do. We would be able to have a client walk in and say, hey, I want out of this industry. And we say, great, here's an apartment and here's a job. We'll see you later. And it doesn't work that way. That's what choice would look like, right? If it really was this free choice, it would be correct. Cool. I don't want to do this, so I'm going to do that now because I have another option. But it just isn't. And so the trauma involved in the sex trade is so complex, and the identity, that the degradation of the person being a commodification for the pleasures of however many men a day they're encountering, the desensitization of self, the loss of self to be the satisfaction of another person's fantasy. It takes a ton of time to heal and for choice to be realized to the individual that's trying to get out of it. So choice is one of the main things that we see as a misconception around the whole commercial sex trade. One of the first misconceptions I had actually when I was entering into this was it doesn't happen here. And I think we still see a little bit of that now. It's not as much, but we still see it. I originally lived in, so not originally, but before I moved to Reno, I lived in China for 4 years. And then I moved to Reno and I came here to do graduate work, and I finished my degree in marriage family therapy. So I have a clinical background. And when I was realizing, hey, I think this might be the thing I'm going to enter into, my draw was always to go back overseas. And I did not plan on staying in America at all. And I thought, this will be the population I'm going to work with. I'm feeling really compelled to look more into this. And the more I looked, the closer to home it kept getting. And I did not expect that. I did not expect to then realize, actually, I can, in my own community, be a part of this and try to develop something, which is sort of the beginning of how Awaken came into fruition. Is I couldn't find anything around to get involved. I couldn't find anybody offer services. The only thing I found in my state was a way for when they turn 18 for them to then legally continue that exploitation through a brothel. And I thought, that can't be the only thing available. That's insane. And it was the only thing we had. And I thought, this is not okay. Women and children deserve so much more. And so trying to find ways to get involved, and then quickly got involved, actually. I was going to move to 4th Street as I'm looking out because I now work on 4th Street. I was planning to move here because I didn't know what the needs were of this population. I didn't know what would help them. And I figured they do. So let me kind of live amongst them and find out. And I ended up not having to. The time that I actually sort of put the stake in the ground, said I'm going to go move on 4th Street and figure this out and learn from them, was the exact time I got an introduction to somebody. It was the same day. I got an introduction to somebody who connected me to a judge. And a week later, I am sitting with this judge, and I am now the counselor for his diversion group for women who got picked up for solicitation. Wow. It was that fast. So that was in 2010. So for the last 10 years, I have probably on a regular basis learned about my own misconceptions as well as those of our community. And so I think each year I continue to learn more and more. I'll tell you one of the most profound ones I had recently. I went on a trip with, it was an international research trip of women that went to Germany to interview men who buy sex in a country where it's illegal. And I thought this will be fascinating because I'm in a state where it's legal. So I want to hear from the buyers of this thing and see what they're thinking, see what their minds are. And they were doing, long 2 to 3 hour interviews with each person. And by the time I had left, I think we'd interviewed over 73 men at that time. The project is to get it, I think, over 100. I think they're there. We're just collecting, they're compiling the data and stuff. But so that hasn't been released, but I can share with you my experience from it and some of the things that I learned that I had misconceptions about as well. And it really is this idea and concept around, does legalization help or harm? And I've already had, the experiences from the women we work with and the data from our state to show the harms, but I had never heard from the men to see what their mindset is like and what does it do for men also. And so just to back up on some of the, to give context, some of the data that I'm referring to. So Nevada is #1 in the nation for the sex trade. And it's an illegal sex trade that we are #1 in. And it's so per capita, we are 63% higher than the next highest state. So we are significantly higher in our rates. So we're also on all the lists you don't want to be on and rank in the places you don't want to rank in when it comes to violence against women, the rates of women to be murdered by men, physical violence for women. We're top 10 for youth to be trafficked in the nation. So we've got now 50 years of data of having a legal sex trade, and I can tell you it has done nothing to bring safety for women and children in our community. Our own community with Reno Sparks, we've had children in every single high school as a client here. There's no one like kids and women are not safe when you have a legal sex trade because you've done nothing to actually eliminate a sex trade. You've only actually promoted the commodification of women's bodies to be used for sex. And so after 50 years of doing this, we have generations that are raised in the normalization of this. Right. So this contrast of, okay, so what is it like to then go to a country and talk to the men who have also had the same thing? They've been raised in a country that this is promoted. You are quite welcome to go purchase women for your fantasy purposes, right? Yeah. And so listening to them, I realized that it really is so much about fantasy. They are walking into an atmosphere where the entire setting is there for them to have their pleasures, right? The name of the person they're purchasing for the function of sex, or whatever they want to do to that person. The whole setting is just to satisfy that fantasy. And so that fantasy is really key. And so if you look at normal male men and women dating behavior, or just dating behavior regardless, there's no fear of rejection. There's no fear of, there's no need to be nervous. Like, that is not helpful for men learning how to date. That is not helpful for men learning how to approach women. Right. Like, you still want a little bit of that awkwardness, because that type of boldness gives them a confidence that says, I can do whatever I want to her. Now, the brain doesn't distinguish fantasy from reality, and there's plenty of research from virtual reality. So, to make this in simple terms, I remember going to see the movie, I think it was Meg, the large shark, the megalodon shark. Do you guys remember that? It's like this crazy movie. It's like Jaws on steroids. Yeah. And so I go into this movie and I get out and it's dark out. And it's a movie, but my brain is experiencing all the emotions, right? And the excitement and this escalated state of being. And I get out and it's like this dirt part outside of the movie theater, and it's gated, and I'm like picturing things flying out at me to shock me. I'm moving myself to my other side of the friend so that they get caught up first. Like, it was ridiculous.
Looking
but
for
the
the
brain
fin.
does not. Yeah, I mean, I'm in this desert. There is no Jaws here. But the brain genuinely doesn't know. It doesn't distinguish the difference between fantasy and reality. And so when in particular repeat buyers, so anything that is there to make money, you're looking for repeat buyers. That's why Apple releases the new phone every year. You want repeat buyers. It's a successful business model. It's no different with the sex trade. You want repeat buyers. You want that habit to continue, because then that is an increase in and money, unfortunately. And that's what this is reduced down to for the traffickers. And so or the brothel owners even. So when a man does this again and again and again, his brain is teaching him this is what women like. This is how women are. This is how you get to behave with women, which explains to me why it also increased these rates of violence, why it has these unfortunate side effects in a community, and it brings harm to the community. It does not help men at all in real life. And unfortunately, this is the real life of the person on the other side of the fantasy, and that's not considered. So you've got this fantasy scenario that they have no need to consider the person on the other side of the transaction and what is their reality. They are not interested if this person is trafficked. They're not interested in the word choice. They're not interested in the age of the person. We work with, sadly, more minors than I ever wish we did that have been trafficked in our community. And I've asked quite a few of them, have they ever asked you your age? The vast majority say no. They've never asked me my age. The ones that have said yes, they said it's only because he was turned on to find out I was young. This is not at all about how to help the person that's being purchased for his fantasy. And so that fantasy component is one thing, the misunderstanding of really how do we look at this? Because I think sometimes we unfortunately try to paint it pretty and try to kind of clean it up. And it's just not. It's abusive and it's degrading to these women. And the things that are in the fantasy, especially of a repeat buyer, that are going further and further down that spectrum of sexual deviancy because the novelty seeking is so important to the dopamine and the serotonin, like all the brain stuff that's engaged in this. And so they continue to go further and further down that, harder and harder to satisfy. And then they have the money piece that gives them permission to do more and more and more to satisfy that fantasy. And that is devastating. Now, the other misconception, and this is the one that I really struggled with, because I used to hear survivors, especially ones that have had a significant amount of healing, that are trying to talk about the harms of illegal sex trade. They would say something like, prostitution is paid rape. And as a standalone statement, I did not understand that. I understood it because I understood the harm that they had experienced, but I just didn't understand it as a standalone statement until I went on this trip. And I realized these buyers, when they were asked something like, do you think she wants to be there? They were like, no, she doesn't want to be there. They know it. Right. The buyers know this, but they don't care. And they're paying to not care. Because if you have, one, the legitimacy of legalizing this, two, the whole experience is around fantasy, and then three, that money piece, you get to make it as common as going to a restaurant and not worried about if your waitress likes their job or not. Right. Because it becomes framed, it's a job like any other. So when it's framed as a job like any other, then you actually have to consider it a job like any other, which means I go into a restaurant, I'm going to go out to eat later today, and I'm not actually, I will acknowledge this, I'm probably not going to think, I wonder if this person is forced to be here. I wonder if this person likes being here. I wonder what this person's going to do with their paycheck. I'm not considering that because it's completely normalized as a job like any other. And so those aren't the things we think about when we're in a transactional situation in employment and you're the customer. And so that is what it ends up doing. And so when you know that person doesn't want to be there, but you're legitimized to still do what you're doing because of the law, if we bring it back to this is a sexual encounter, if a man wants to sleep with a woman who doesn't want to sleep with him, what do we call that?
Assault, right?
Yeah. So it starts as sexual harassment, and then when he actually goes through with it, it's assault. It is rape. The thing that has confused everyone is what happens when he leaves money. Is the money or the sex what she wanted? Right. She didn't want the sex. She wants the money. She needs the money. And so the money confuses everybody. And so in my opinion, after being in this for 10 years and listening to survivors and now listening to buyers, the money is the thing that actually rebrands the whole experience. And what is usually called choice and consent, what is normally in a normal interaction without money. So this should be sexual assault, rape, and a violation that is bringing harm to an individual because the fantasy is not her reality. That's the rebrand. It gets to be called consent and choice. And so they've totally shifted the whole thing because of that money piece. That money is the coercive piece in the transaction. And the law then actually aligns with the fantasy of the buyer, not the reality of the survivor, because the law poses no harm and no risk to the buyer.
Wow. I think just putting that all in that context, in that way, right? I think really kind of breaking that down, really examining, the fact that there is money involved, and suddenly, this may imply consent, right? Or be confusing in this case.
It confuses everyone.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, right? But I love, again, that we're taking time and you're doing like such an eloquent and wonderful job really discussing this, because I think this is what it takes, right? I think it is, kind of like what you said, right? What I kind of shared before getting into this field, there was a lot of misconceptions on our parts, right? And I think that misconception leads to that normalcy, leads to that, entitlement, because I have this money, and so what? This is the culture we grew up in. This is what, maybe as a guy, I'm supposed to do, or it's totally normal, right? And so it really takes this education. It takes people hearing things so disheartening, like children at every high school you work around. I mean, that's really, the gravity of that is so heavy if you really take a moment with that, right? And so, I mean, just to kind of like move into that, we know there's a lot of other really shocking statistics, right, that kind of surround this. I know Bree going to go ahead. She has some specific trafficking statistics to kind of share as well, because again, this is the important part, right? We have to kind of get rid of that misinformation. We have to bring you the accurate numbers and the accurate reality, right? Like she said, not kind of slammed up or cleaned up. We have to bring you the accurate reality. And so, Bree, if you would not mind sharing some of those stats with us.
Yeah, so what we have is human trafficking is a multi-billion-dollar criminal industry that steals freedom from 24.9 million people around the world. We say around the world, but obviously we know that it's happening here. And like Melissa was talking about, she was expecting to go do this work in another place, but she found the work here. It's not just around, it is all the way around the world, but including here. Human trafficking generates annually over $150 billion in illegal profits. And the average age of a teen that is sex trafficked is 12 to 14 years old. So, Melissa, I'll share with you, I'm pregnant with a baby girl right now, and so I think I'm being a little bit more impacted by all of this today, just because, knowing, bringing a baby girl into the world, and oh my gosh, just thinking about everything that, and we know that boys can be victims as well, but just thinking about the stereotypical victim as a girl and how young it is, and to think about, other parents of those children. And yeah, I just thank you so much for sharing all that you've shared. I've been through training on human trafficking, sex trafficking before, and I'm learning so much from you already, and we're one serious question into this. So thank you so much.
Just to encourage you, I, just as you shared that, I had this like overwhelming encouragement actually for your girl. If you don't mind, I'd love to just say it. So I feel like your daughter's going to come into the world better than when we came into it. And I know that's counter logic, but in regard to this, I feel I feel like the hope survivors give me is phenomenal. Like their impact in our world is beyond anything I've ever seen. Their ability to transform a life of victimization into a life of freedom, and to stop their generations from it continuing. And I see that more now than I've ever seen it. When we first started doing this work, was it 24 million? That was the global number, right?
24.9.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So 10 years ago, it was 27 million. And so we're seeing numbers change. We're seeing, and in our own community, I used to declare, like, I have faith for every 27 million, every single one of them. I have faith for that they will have a life of freedom. And then, behind the scenes, I'm going, can we just see one? I just need one. When we first started, because we didn't have anything available. We have so much available now that we see so many now. and life is changing and the world is getting better. And I know that's hard to believe with the noise of the world right now, but I believe that is also for your daughter's entry into here, that she will then continue to advance it. And it'll be set up better for her than it was for us when we came into it.
I love
I
that.
hope that's okay. It literally came on me when you started talking about that.
No,
That was
thank you so
great.
much.
I was like, you start crying. I'm gonna start crying. I was like, like,
Trickling
don't let this
effect.
waterfall. Yeah,
You
don't
can't-
start the waterfall of this right now. We can't all go down.
You can't trust the
but no.
hormones right now.
But no, that was beautiful. That was
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I just think
Oh,
the
I'm gonna.
education and awareness that we have now around human trafficking, specifically sex trafficking, is pretty amazing. You know, the education that also law enforcement is required to take and is now taking, you know, now knowing how to screen for sex trafficking and CSEC as well, opposed to back then where, you know, if a child could be picked up for prostitution and be charged for that. And nowadays, it's like, specifically in California, where that no longer happens, that no longer is allowed or legal to do. So I think, you know, definitely I'm hoping that we'll continue to move forward, that we'll continue to spread awareness and education around sex trafficking and let people know in our community that this is happening, right? And we all need to be educated to really be able to identify those red flags and really know how to help and support someone who is a victim.
Yeah, I think, Melissa, everything that you're saying, I think I'm going to go back and listen to this episode a few more times, especially that part about the hope,
Yeah.
you know, that it's down that 3 or so million, you know, just remind ourselves of that and let that encourage us to keep doing the work and to keep moving forward in that same direction.
Yeah, and just the belief your daughter's going to be a warrior. Like, she'll be awesome. She'll be totally prepared to tackle what life brings, because we
I
are.
love that.
We all are able to. And I've seen it, just the courage of the women we work with. You know, I have really seen the testimony of, it doesn't matter what life brings somebody, the ability to overcome and the resilience and the grit of women is just incredible.
I was going to say that resilience. It's really incredible. And I think we all kind of have that shared experience. We all work in, you know, some way with victims, with survivors, right? And sometimes the stories we hear, the experiences we know someone's been through for, you know, maybe you or just an onlooker could be like, oh my God, you know, like how are you making it through? How did you make it through that? How are you moving forward, right? And it's you know, on the other hand, it's a really inspiring thing to see the amount of just absolute resiliency and grit, like you said. And so, yeah, love that, you know, we can kind of have that moment as well.
Absolutely. Moving into our next question, we have who are the victims of sex trafficking and who is at risk?
Yeah, the scary thing, we got to go back to scary stuff, huh? So
We take little breaks, but we have to go back. Yeah.
We cry, we laugh, we come back. Yeah.
One of the scary things is if you have a social media account, you're at risk. You're at risk of somebody accessing you, somebody you don't know. And, you know, if you ask kids if anybody's ever sent you a direct message or a private message on social media that you didn't know, they're going to say, yeah, happens all the time. And for the most part, that's what we see as some of the main recruiting tactics now. You know, for parents, one of the main things I believe in is your child's still your child. They don't have a right to privacy when it comes to their social media and their messaging. I think you absolutely should check those kinds of things because we see it used very often. I think being in the foster system is another risk that we've seen, unfortunately. You know, essentially anything that can be exploited by a trafficker is a vulnerability, is a risk, and is somebody at risk. So somebody with a history of abuse and neglect. We've seen it anywhere from adults who maybe never had the history of abuse and neglect, but they got caught up in an addiction. How to fund that addiction, we've seen that exploited as a way to convince somebody to do something they wouldn't have normally done had this not been a part of their path. You know, so the desire to be loved, unfortunately, is able to be exploited as well. And so healthy desires, unhealthy desires can be vulnerabilities. It doesn't mean I go around thinking everybody's going to be trafficked, but I think it is good still to know and have an awareness that it's not just that one sort of stereotyped person that you think of. It's just unfortunately accessible. It's like saying who's at risk of having a thief come, and steal something. Like,
Right. Kind of
yeah,
anyone.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I've done work in prisons in Susanville. Actually, I've met with a lot of men in there that have been in there for many, many years, and they simplified it for me. They said if somebody's willing to buy it, I'm going to have it to sell. And so if we go to like a state that this is where it's okay to have it, then I'm going to be there to sell it. And so they're going to then look for, how do we meet that demand? And so, in particular, Nevada being a sex tourism state, they got to meet the demand. That this is where men want to come to buy this. And so finding more and more individuals to keep up with the demand is what they're going to do. And so
Right.
the best way for them to find the individual is to find something to exploit to then strategically get them into the, the sex trade, unfortunately.
Yeah. I once remember hearing this was, our old executive director, and she was extremely passionate about trafficking as well. She was on a local coalition called PATH, right, against, trafficking of humans. And I remember her describing it, and she said, when it comes to trafficking, this is really the awful part because it's so lucrative. It's so lucrative because instead of a normal business where, say, I'm Starbucks and say you come in and I sell you this coffee. So I had to buy, right, the coffee, I had to buy the cup that it goes in to then sell it to you. So every transaction, I'm losing a little bit of money, right? And she said the awful thing about, human trafficking is that, what kind of seedy businessman, right, that's not aligning with morals or values, what seedy businessman kind of wouldn't take the opportunity to sell something that's constantly reusable, right, and at no detriment to them? And I remember, and when you really think about that, I mean, that is so dark. It is so insidious and kind of mind blowing, but that's honestly the truth of it, right? And that's something that's so important to keep in mind, and I love that you especially bring up that demand piece, right? Because that's where or those, seedy businessmen, these traffickers are going to bring in that supply because of that demand and that normalcy. And so
Yeah.
going with that, because, it's important to kind of note that really anyone can be victimized. There's so many circumstances of how that could happen and how someone could, be preyed on for whatever vulnerability, whatever insecurity. And so looking a little bit further, maybe you could share, because now our audience is kind of primed, it really could happen to anybody, right? Especially someone with those vulnerabilities. But how about if someone maybe is trying to notice some signs, right? Maybe someone out there listening right now has a friend and they've been acting a little bit strange. Would you be able to share what are some red flags of maybe someone that is being trafficked that someone else could perhaps recognize to report or provide support to that person?
Yeah, so I think, some of the things are definitely a change in behavior, change in friends, if it's a kid, change in grades. They would have to have time where they aren't accountable. They're not with somebody that they said they were with. And sometimes it's sneaking out at night. So getting reports of, your daughter's falling asleep in class every day this week. Is something happening? Is she not getting sleep at night? And, just completely unaware, because we have seen where they sneak out at night and then come back. They're still living at home with their family and they're completely unaware that this is happening. And so, there's these, fairly normal age, like development behaviors of sneaking out. Like I did when I was a kid and I wasn't trafficked. Like these are some things that don't have
Sure.
to say this means you're trafficked.
Right.
But when it's, maybe there's markings on their body and it goes with the change of the grades and it goes with the change of friends, the change in attitude, the secrecy, the privacy, the you don't understand me, that's a little bit beyond what normal age development is, because I know that's also preteen and teen, some of those things. So,
Right.
you know, seeing it more excessive than what is normal development. Those are things that you're going to indicate, whether it's trafficking or not, it's something, and it warrants, stepping in and loving well in that time,
Yeah.
and meeting the kids where they're at and wrapping them up and spending more time paying attention to them, having the eye contact, letting them have attachment, making sure attachment is secure. Those are the types of things that's just, you know, essentially just family, being family in that situation. So that's some stuff you want to do just to kind of keep it and prevent it from happening. But if it is, those are some of the indicators you might see. If they start getting their nails done, starting doing makeup differently, different clothes, they suddenly have a new iPhone or a new purse, different shoes. So different things are showing up that can't be explained. that might also be an indication. If there's any kind of you're not too sure about sexual activity, if there's an STI, things like that, those are all things that you're going to want to have conversation around. And I know it's really hard, especially when you're family and especially if you're a parent, but to try to do so in a way that does encourage them to have the conversation versus shuts it down because of the fear and the judgment, because they will sense that and it will push them away, unfortunately. Will do the exact opposite of what you're hoping for.
Right.
Thank you, Melissa, for sharing that. And I just want to highlight as well that, victims of sex trafficking do not always self-identify as a victim of a crime or sex trafficking, right? They don't always ask for immediate help. So it's not like they will come to their, let's pretend this is a child, a minor, they will not just go to their parent and say, Mom, Dad, I'm being sex trafficked, right? It's not something that they may not identify as, or for many other reasons, such as shame or self-blame, or maybe there's distrust in law enforcement or authority, also fear, or fear of arrest or deportation or incarceration if they're an adult, or the victim may not realize that they are being trafficked, which is something that does happen, right? Or they may think that their trafficker is actually, their boyfriend or girlfriend, right? And so it's so important to highlight
Yeah.
that, it's really important as a just caring community member and just as a person to just really get familiar with those red flags and those warning signs, so that we're able to be there for that person and support that person.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned too that, and I think it's common, right, that usually most traffickers, they kind of do, they present themselves almost as that romantic figure, right, that kind of boyfriend type, that girlfriend type, and sometimes it's kind of like, especially the circumstance, right, we're looking at, it's possibly someone vulnerable, they're maybe going through something, maybe homeless, maybe foster youth, maybe runaway, whatever it is, right? So maybe they kind of present themselves almost as like this knight in shining armor, right? So of course, those bonds of love and trust they're going to be built pretty quickly with this person. Yeah. And so maybe by the time they're asking you to do some pretty wild stuff that you would not normally do, the trust is there, the rapport is there. This person may have been helping them, right? So yeah, so many factors. And I love that you brought that one up. But Melissa, we would love to hear from you some other, besides maybe that kind of boyfriend aspect. What are some tactics that traffickers could kind of use to prey upon that vulnerability?
Yeah, the boyfriend one's actually the most common. And then sometimes for the online ones, we've seen where, they think it's somebody, the sort of catfish scenario where they think they're talking to somebody and then they've gone to meet that person and it's somebody else, and it's not what they expected. And so it's a story that was unexpected. And a lot of times, through the romance, that connection, it's, hey, why don't you bring your friends to this party as well? So there's sort of recruiting also happening unknowingly to the individual, which is just terrifying and dangerous. But there's a lot of people that have gotten their friends wrapped up in this completely innocently, not meaning to cause harm to their friends or put them in danger, because of the social aspect of how, in the stages of development, that peer piece is so strong growing
Right.
up. They meet this developmental normalcy and exploit it. And so the social piece, the romance piece, there's the occasional kidnapping, but I will tell you it's rare. It's not what we normally see. The movie Taken, is sort of unfortunate in the trafficking world because I think people assume that's it. It's this
Right.
sort of that's what it looks like, and more often than not, that's not the experience of the survivors we work with. There was romance involved. And then there's the familial trafficking as well that we see where, she's raised in a family that mom or dad, unfortunately, is also raised as being trafficked themselves and turned out themselves. And so then that next generation gets raised in the same thing. So I've seen unfortunate situations where, a dad would have poker games with his buddies, and they would be betting on the daughter and who gets to do what they want with her. Brie, I'm really sorry. I know I'm just bringing this up and it's not going to be good. Um, and
Did you
then
hear
in
me
other
take a deep
scenarios,
breath just then?
yeah, I was gauging as whether or not to say it, but and I don't mean to say that that's the normal. It's not, but it is worth noting the familial piece, because I don't know that how often that actually gets addressed. And then I've seen scenarios where, one survivor's talked about their mom was in the life, and at a young age, she was essentially sold out to her drug dealer, who then trafficked her as well. to kind of get the fixed for addictions. Addictions will turn a person into somebody they would never ever become
Right.
prior to that and without that. And so those are some of the unfortunate consequences that can come from those things.
Yeah,
So
don't
yeah,
feel like
the
you have to.
familial,
Oh, sorry. I
yeah,
was just gonna say, don't feel like you have to hold back just because of my
yeah,
reactions over here. We
yeah.
really need
It
to
was
get
more of a
this
pause.
out.
Yeah, it was a pause and then noticing it and wanted to have a consideration to it. But yeah, we'll still get it out there. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
the romance is the number one that we see. And then you've got some outliers, the gorilla, which is just force, aggression, the trafficker or the kidnapper, and then the familial. I think that's more the common ones we get.
Yeah. And it's just so, again, it's so important. I think that's a large part of this misconception, right? People watch movies like Taken, they see media representations or stories of trafficking occurrences. So if they see something close to home, first off, they may think like, nope, not trafficking because that's here, right? Doesn't happen here. First roadblock. Second roadblock could be, well, I mean, they're not being like handcuffed to a bed or, kind of given drugs or any of those really, I mean, really intense kind of kidnapping, Taken-esque trafficking situations or scenarios we've seen, right? So maybe, yeah, there is love. There was a relationship, and now it's really spiraled something so unhealthy and dangerous. But people around them may say, well, it's here. I don't see her being chained up anywhere, right? So, yeah, a large part of the time, it looks like she's going along with that, right? When there could be so much, again, fear, threats, coercion, manipulation that really underpins that. But I think that's what gets in someone's way from seeing it and actually recognizing it for what it is. And so appreciative for you to really break some of that down, really talk about, the different kinds of tactics. I think it's so important, especially, kind of like Bree right now, kind of, and the best part is Bree, we all work in this field. So these are things she's heard, but I think right now in this state, it's even more overwhelming, right? But I think especially for parents, this is to to realize and kind of understand that this is happening on social media, that this is such a big aspect of it. I mean, all these little pieces, as dark, again, as difficult as they could be to hear and process, so vitally important, right? For understanding it, for navigating, you yourself, other people kind of away from this being a possibility in their lives. And so super appreciative for kind of all you shared with us today. We're going to take obviously more time. We will do further episodes. We would love it. Maybe you can come back sometime soon because you've just been an absolute joy to hang out with today and talk to. But yeah, we're going to dive into this, definitely a lot deeper. But today, I think this was a great start to kind of get people acclimated a little bit, right? With really kind of just taking that cover off and just,
Hmm.
really looking at this for what it is, not Taken, not the stories that
Mhm.
we're hearing in the news. And so, Bree, why don't you go ahead? Because, maybe there's some people out there listening. Maybe they do need some additional support, right? After hearing this episode, maybe you have further questions. Maybe you have stuff that I need to have answered now. I can't wait for your next episode on this. So, Bree, would you mind sharing out our info? So if anyone wants to get in touch with us.
Yeah, and just a note on that, we know that tactics used by recruiters and traffickers and their associates are often the same tactics used by batterers, and they can mirror dynamics of domestic violence. So if you or someone you know is experiencing any of these things, there is help. We have our crisis line, which is 24/7, and it is confidential assistance. That is 535444444. So you just get that 530, the first five, the rest is fours. And then, Melissa, is there contact information for Awaken that you'd want to share?
Yeah, 775-393-9183 if you need to just make a phone call. We also have our website, awakenreno.org. And on there is a way you can even just fill out a real simple form if you just want us to contact you back and let us know a safe way to contact you back. And then you can always email us info@awakenreno.org as well. And then
I'll
we have a
send it
drop-in
where.
center if you guys just want to drop by. 12 to 5 most days we're here. Actually, every day we're here. Drop-ins open, limited hours, but if you just come any day, Monday through Friday, 12 to 5, we're going to find a way to meet your needs.
Awesome.
Thank you so
We'll
much.
link everything below too. That way, if our listeners were like, oh my gosh, like what was the number? What hours are there? We're going to put everything. If you're watching this on YouTube, all of it will be down in our little description. So don't worry
We
if you
got you.
didn't hear the number. Yeah, we
Mm-hmm.
got you. Got you, boo boo. But really quickly, Melissa, I want to ask you, maybe if someone is out in the community, let's say someone's out at a restaurant, wherever they could, I mean, right now it's kind of weird to think about people being out together, but let's say someone is out in public safely, and maybe they see a situation that is just kind of ringing some of those little alarm bells we heard about today. Maybe it's like a weird dynamic. We see someone younger with like an older boyfriend or girlfriend, and it kind of just seems a little out of place. Maybe this younger person is maybe dressed up, right? Maybe this young girl does have like a short skirt on, like lots of makeup, the Michael Kors bag when it looks like, how did you work enough to afford that Michael
Mhm.
Kors? You're only about in 10th
Sure.
grade, right? If someone sees these warning signs, do you suggest that someone just calls in that number that you gave us? I mean, should people be like worried, like, oh, I don't know if it's really trafficking, maybe not call, or would you guys just rather someone calls?
I would actually rather they call law enforcement because we wouldn't be able to do anything in a
Mm,
situation like that. So we don't do vigilante work, and we don't
Right.
recommend anybody does.
They're down
But
here at the 7-Eleven, right?
yeah,
Right
it's
now, yeah.
surprising. We do get some calls where they want to go and intervene right then, and what they don't realize is the additional harm that that could impose on the
Mm-hmm.
individual.
Right,
And
right.
so even if she's not, you don't physically see her with the person, he could still be watching the situation. And so the best intentions can still cause harm. And so, there's the concept of when helping hurts. And so just being mindful of that. And so I would say call the authorities of what you see, and they will be far more effective than what we would be able to do and have the liberty to do in that situation.
absolutely. And I think it's
Awesome.
important to highlight to just make sure that you document, some of the small details, never physically intervene. Because like Melissa mentioned, you could actually, that victim could get hurt more because of that, or your safety can be at risk as well. So definitely make sure you call your local law enforcement to make a report. With that being said, Melissa, is there anything you would like to specifically highlight?
Ah, so much.
Yeah.
That
We'll
was a
have
Yeah.
them
loaded
back. Don't worry.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to
Yes.
come back after this good
Yes.
conversation. I still think as heavy as this gets, I think it's important to not leave people feeling hopeless or helpless. And a lot of times, I hear from people beyond this, what we do, that's how people can experience this kind of information. And, I think it's as simple as I once heard about this information and it changed my life. And so it can be empowering to hear these things and to never doubt the potential of yourself. So what you are as a human are capable of, it doesn't matter if you're a stay-at-home mom. It doesn't matter if you are working 80 hours a week. There is a sphere of influence that you have access to that can bring change. That's the whole reason we have city transformation as one of our pillars. We have no interest in being an organization that you're going to outsource the solution to. Like you as a community, anybody watching this, Awaken's not the answer. The whole community is. That's why we
Yeah.
want. One of the things we started to do when we first got into this is we thought, okay, what is anybody doing? It's a safe house. So I guess we have to do a safe house, and that's how you answer this problem. It's not. It's important, but it is not the answer. It is a component of healing.
Yeah.
So what we've revamped was a safe city. We don't just want one house that's safe. We want a whole city that's safe. And so we want people to come here and be like, yeah, this is safe for women. This is safe for children. And that's where everybody gets to be a part of making this a safe community. City transformation is what people can do. You can use it in whatever sphere of influence you have, and you know better than anybody else your capacity for bringing change. So I absolutely want to leave people feeling empowered, not helpless, not hopeless around this issue, because we are seeing it happen and it works. And as a result, survivors are now realizing they're important to this community. They see when people show up to events, they see when
Yes.
people bring awareness. And when they once felt completely overlooked and unseen and unheard, they are now experience their value, that people care. And so it
Yeah.
matters. You showing up absolutely matters, and it is seen by them.
Yeah. And in a way that, they're represented in a way that really reflects who they are, right? Or their actual experience and what they're actually going through. I love that. And yeah, that's kind of what we're always hoping for with these, right? We always kind of educate our listeners and we always take time because we don't want to be like, look out for this and see you later, right? We're always trying to, empower and what can we do and how do we step in? And, so I'm really happy that we've kind of, especially spent that time at the end, right? Kind of really looking into what we could do, right? Boots on the ground in a situation, right? What's a way that we can kind of go about that? But again, we'll continually talk about this. There's so much more to unpack with this issue. Until that, again, call us, call Melissa, right? Fill out that form online. They can contact you whenever it's convenient for you, but reach out. Having this conversation, like she said, this is the way to promote change, right? This is the way to, have survivors know that they are represented, they are included, they are understood, and in the same time, that we aren't normalizing this in the way where this is okay in our community, right? That we actually are normalizing it and we understand this is an issue and we won't allow this to happen. So that being said, it was a good first start today. But we, of course, after diving into all that heavy stuff, as usual, we're going to take time. We're going to decompress a little bit. So, Melissa, this is your first time with us. We always do a guided meditation at the end of our podcast. Have you ever meditated before?
Yeah, I've done guided meditations as well.
Love it. So you can sit back and relax. I'll talk you through it. So, for our listeners out there that are able to take on this meditation at this time, for my amazing guest and co hosts, just find yourself into a comfortable seated position, somewhere where you can fully relax. And I want you to take one of those big, kind of cleansing sigh breaths I just did. One of those, let it out. And I want you to take a nice deep breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. Turn your feet onto the floor. Breathe in and out. Take a deep breath in. Gently close your eyes and exhale. Continue this breathing. Maybe make your inhales the same length as your exhales. Every exhale, let your body sink a little heavier into your seat. As you continue with this breathing, just continually relax. If you feel any stress or tension in your body, send your breath to that space to help relax. For the next few moments, only thing that's important is breathing in and breathing out. On your next inhale, breathe in some positive energy. Exhale any stress. Take a deep breath in, breathing some kind words to yourself. Exhale negative self-talk. Breathe in, give yourself some encouragement. Exhale anything you have to let go of. One last big breath in, set an intention for the day. Hold it. Exhale, release that intention. One last big breath in and out. And you can go back to your normal breathing. Start to wiggle fingers and toes. Roll wrists and ankles. start to shift in your seats. Bring your attention back into your body, back into the room. If you haven't yet, you can gently float your eyes back open into the room. Make any adjustment you need.
Ah, thank you, Lisa, for that lovely meditation. That was much needed. You're amazing.
So welcome. Thank you, Melissa, for breathing along
Hmm.
with us too.
Yes, and thank
Yeah,
you,
thanks for
Melissa.
having me.
Yes, thank you for being here and having this amazing, important conversation with us and making our listeners aware of what sex trafficking is. For more information on human trafficking or sex trafficking, please visit www.humantraffickinghotline.org. We hope you will all join us again. Thank you for being part of this one conversation.